Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Okay, great. The problem with a panel this size is that once you've introduced a panel, you've got basically 10 minutes left to have the conversation. But welcome to this afternoon's session. I'd just like to share with you the context of the conversation. I won't call it primed, but I've given the panelists a bit of a heads up because there's nothing worse than sitting on a panel not knowing where the questions are going to be coming from. But I will leave that to you towards the end of the conversation. What I chose as a context is a piece of research that was recently published in the Harvard Business Review. And it's a piece of research by two authors, Jean Martin, and the other author's name, I think, is Conrad Schmidt. The focus of this was on how organizations can retain top talent. In fact, that's the title of the article. The aspect that appealed to me most was that they conducted a longitudinal study across more than 100 countries, 100 organizations at least, across multiple countries, looking at over 20,000 employees who were identified as emerging or rising stars. And they particularly focused on what these employees' views of their employer organization was, how they related to the management in those organizations, and they were particularly interested in how they did that across varying economic conditions. The outcome of that research was very interesting as well, in the sense that they identified that senior and executive leaders, the people on my left and your right, are those that shape the organizational culture in which your rising stars, the people on my right and your left, would actually operate. The interesting outcome was that they found, with the best of intent, many senior leaders unfortunately developed misguided assumptions about this group of employees, and in fact, on their behalf, often make certain decisions around their careers. And unfortunately, that very often leads to these individuals being hampered in their growth and development, to the extent that their view is that there are roughly six typical mistakes organizations make when it comes to managing their rising or emerging stars. The first of those is assuming that your stars are always going to be engaged. And to make that assumption is very dangerous. Secondly, equating high performance with high potential. So making assumptions about a person's future performance based on the current reality. Delegating accountability for these key individuals to line managers who very often are ill-equipped to cope with that responsibility. Then shielding these individuals from early career derailing experiences, almost being too protective, not allowing them to learn from those experiences. Expecting these individuals, this is quite a contentious one, often to share the pain when the organization is going through a difficult period. I think it's important to bear in mind that your stars always have the opportunity to move within the market. They are always in demand. And then lastly, and very much the topic of this afternoon's conversation, failing to align the interests of your stars with the corporate agenda or the corporate strategy. And what I asked the panelists to do was to reflect on their own personal experiences, from a star perspective, in terms of firstly whether they relate to these mistakes, have they encountered them as challenges in their respective careers, and more importantly, how have they managed to deal with those challenges and how have their organizations stepped up to address those. To the CEO panelists, I've asked a similar but different question. How have they targeted certain key initiatives to mitigate against this kind of risk? And time permitting, also asking them to share how they've aligned their talent and business strategies. So the questioning will very much hinge around those 6 issues and the respective experiences of the panelists, the stars, and the CEOs. All right, I shall now sit and engage in conversation. Thank you. Unfortunately, Hazel elected to sit in the hot seat, so if we proceed from left to right, if I could perhaps ask each of the stars just to share their own personal experience, but given the number of people on the stage, if you could be as brief and as to the point as you can, just to afford the other panelists the opportunity to have their say. All right, but I'll hand over to Hazel as the first star.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Thank you. I think my experience with the leadership and how CEOs engage young talent in organizations has been that more often you find that you are identified as a young talent and everybody has great intentions to help develop you into the aspirational roles that you have. But what happens it becomes a battle between you as a young person having to push your way through so that you are recognized, and therefore putting a lot of emphasis on you taking the responsibility of developing yourself. But if you are in a new organization, a larger organization, it becomes very stifling for a young talent.
And I think just to build on that, Hazel, often there's a lack of appreciation of the pressure that comes to bear on someone who's almost put up on that pedestal as being a key resource, critical talent, rising star, however you choose to define it.
I suppose it also depends on how you are viewed. There's different elements to that. There's the fact that you either have mentors that are with you throughout the journey. If you either lose that through the process, then they're being put in the pedestal becomes a completely different story. However, on the flip side, as you are put on the pedestal, there's so much pressure for you to perform it up to a certain level. And if you don't have the support and the mentorship of learning how to deal with the new challenges, then you're overwhelmed. A lot of young people get to a stage where you don't know if you're going to succeed or fail in this environment. And I think a lot of it is with the responsibility of CEOs as well as the organization as a whole to build a supporting structure that seeks to harness that skill and support it.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
My experience has been that you need to take a multifaceted approach. So experience or having a talented individual is one thing, but there's a lot to be said for experience coupled with a talented individual, and there's a lot to be said for all the other programs that are required. So in terms of formal education, offering those people education so that they have frameworks to refer back to in difficult times where they have business dilemmas or ethical dilemmas. It's always easy to refer back to something concrete than to base it only on your experience. And again, I think mentorship is, for me personally, has really been a huge help. And I don't have one mentor. I have 4 mentors, because I have a female mentor, and I have a male mentor who sits in New York, and I have a male mentor that sits here. And I have a family mentor, and I believe that different areas of business, I reach out to one of them depending on what the scenario, what the situation is. And I also just think that as well as all of those things, you have to take ownership. As if you know that you've been identified as top talent, you can't just sit back and expect your organization to drive everything forward for you. One of the main things I see with my staff when I assign a mentor to them is they expect this mentor to contact them every month and chase them, and it's not about that. They, as a mentee, you have to drive that relationship. That person is busy. That person is giving you of their time. They don't owe you a big favor. So I think just taking ownership for your own growth, and lastly, the biggest thing I think is having goals. If you don't have goals, if you don't sit at the beginning of every year and write those goals down and make sure that they are achievable and realistic and that they have a time frame, then you are not going to move forward as quicker as most other people would, because you will then have a look at the resources around you, whether it be education, whether it be networking possibilities, or whether it be any opportunity within the organization. And you won't know what to prioritize because we're all busy.
Thanks very much. I think just to distill 2 messages for me out of that was to understand that individuals exist within a context. And it's all good and well to identify people with potential who are high performers. We mustn't forget about their readiness as well, because sometimes we're inclined to rush people too quickly. But to be very aware of the fact that that support infrastructure is so instrumental in those people realizing their full potential. And oftentimes we identify who we believe the rising stars are and simply believe that they're going to realize that ambition and potential because they are who they are, losing sight of the fact that that support is absolutely essential to them.
And most important, which I actually should have ended with, is when you get to the top, or when you don't kick the ladder. There's a lot of other people that are coming up, and you've got a lot of information that you can impart, and you've learned a lot of lessons, and you should help them.
Great, thank you. Sure.
David, I think leaders understand in organizations that there's a battle for talent. So I think leaders have the best expectations. Where I think the issue can come in sometimes is not understanding what rising stars or young leaders really want. And I think there's different aspects to that, but some of that is generational theory around, how the values of organizations, which are traditional values, versus kind of Generation Y values, which are, there's a gap there which has to be bridged. So I think that the challenge for leaders is understanding what younger people, rising stars, want, and understanding what clever people want. And if leaders have a good understanding of those things, they can manage their engagements appropriately. I'd be happy to talk further about those things, but for me that's a very key point.
But I think you highlight a very important aspect, at least, of any integrated approach to managing talent, and that's one of differentiation. It's a case of not one size fitting all, but to almost engage people individually, understand what is important to that individual, where are they at that point in time, life-wise, career-wise, wherever it might be, and to make sure that what you do put in place caters to that. I think we see a lot of corporates with the best of intent having these generic approaches to developing pools of talent. And I think there's a dilution of value that comes through there, and you find people underperforming. And the expectation that is built up from that group is inevitably never realized, and you then sit with a retention problem at some point as well because of that lack of, I suppose, promise never being realized.
And I think leaders, this is not a universal error, but sometimes you start from a starting premise, which is the way things were done in my day. And I think that always has to be challenged, and one has to look with an open mind to assess whether what you think is good for a person is actually what that person wants, because I think in my experience there's often a gap. And that gap is developing much quicker as the world develops at a rapid, more and more rapid pace.
And there's that well-known saying, treat others how you would like to be treated. I think it's more a case of treat them how they would like to be treated, not to make that mistake. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think for me the challenge is, I think something that you touched on is normally talent, leadership will delegate that to line management to try and if you are identified as a rising star, they will leave it to line management to try and sort of help you. But then that is a problem, because if you look at rising stars, it's people that, you do deliver, and line management will look at that and say, of course you deliver. But then there's so many other facets that make up a rising star. You are looking for mentorship. You're looking for someone who you sit down with and engage, and you say, okay, this is the journey that you're on. This is where the organization takes you. So someone that will look at the company and look at your strengths and say, this type of personality is the type of personality that will fit in this strategic role within the company. And what I have experienced, and I've been blessed, is that I'm in a small organization, Post Bank, a division of the post office, believe it or not. And here I am, I'm a rising star, and that is attributed to my boss, who took, he took ownership in terms of, this is what we want to do with Post Bank. What do you think? Where do you fit in? And with the talents that you have, where can you support us? And I've moved from being an attorney, I'm now looking at payments, I'm now looking at channels, saying, how do you get an attorney to start now having ATMs? It's different, but that takes a leader and talent to say, this is where the organization is going, and this is how we can use this individual to get where the organization is going to.
Fantastic, thank you. Karen?
For me, the journey with a corporate starts long before you walk into that corporate. And while I've worked for some really great companies, what got me to walk through their door was the people that I interacted with and the people that I was going to go and work with. And to me, when you work with people that believe in you, that encourage you, that get the best out of you every single day, that's when as leaders you really have talent. And when I looked at your question and thought, in all the companies, that moment when I knew it was time to go, it wasn't because I didn't believe in the company and I didn't believe in the corporate. It was people who had changed my view on, were we really authentic, or were we really all working towards the goal? It was that moment when I knew I wasn't going to give of my best anymore to that company. And what's fascinating, I kind of went back on the history, and very often, or in all cases when I've left, it has been around the change of very senior leadership, where somehow the authenticity of the corporate cultures, values, and our beliefs of what we were coming to work to do had changed. And something in that was lost for me. And that was when I decided it was time to leave and go and join another group of incredible, amazing people who were going to get the best out of me every day while I was there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Leslie, can I
Is
look
it
at
my
you?
turn?
It's your turn.
Oh, okay. No, I had my learned friend here talk about clever people. I thought he was going to say something about clever blacks. I've just... I come from a different angle. One, I think we all need to accept in this room that we don't live in a perfect world, and that there's no such thing as a perfect being. One of my favorite sports is golf. In golf, there's a thing called the mulligan. When you hit the ball and you do the master golf, in other words, 3-3, master 3-3, they give you a chance to hit the ball again. And I really believe that everybody in this world deserves a second chance. And unless and I'm glad that there's a tone that's been said about leadership, because it is about leadership, and leadership is crucial, because everything in society stands and falls based on leadership. My own leadership model is what was developed by Ken Blanchard, the one who wrote The 1 Minute Manager. Met Ken Blanchard in India last year, and he talked about what is called lead like Jesus. Now, Jesus, I hope you all know who Jesus is. He was the most misunderstood person. To this day, he's still the most misunderstood person. But the one thing about Jesus was that he was a very forgiving person, and he gave people a chance. And he was the kind of leader that loved people so much that he would even give his own life. Now, unless you have a love for people and you're in a senior management position, the organization is going to fail. So it starts with that. For me, it's about the love for people. And if I sound all romantic and stuff, that's cool. I think it's allowed. Number two, for me, it's about servanthood. In the book of Matthew, those of you that have the Bible, it does exist. Matthew 20, verse 26. Jesus says to his disciples, he says, you have heard how, and you have seen how the leaders of the Gentile lord it over them. But he says to his disciples, it shall not be so with you. That whoever amongst you desires to be great, let them learn to be a servant. And let them be a slave. And being a slave basically means that you strip yourself of titles. I must be honest with you. I've just come back from a conference where everybody's a general, lieutenant, major, this, and I'm sick of it. I'm sick of titles because I think titles have a way of getting in the way of our ability to connect as human beings and our ability to be able to transform organization and transform society, because and there's nothing wrong, by the way, with authority. I'm all for authority, but I have a problem with titles. Robin Sharma has a book entitled Leader Without a Title. I like that because I think the moment that I can connect with you as a human being and as a member of my team, the better I'm able to extract value out of you. So I'm going to keep quiet for now.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you, David. I think Leslie inspired me. I'm sure I'll start going to church. Well, you're welcome, brother. Yeah, I think in our professional organization, we are almost referred to as training ground. And I can relate to every single story that our rising staff have said. What we do, we take students raw from university, we bring them into our organization, we provide training for them. At the end of the traineeship, we keep some go, some stay, and so we go. So if you look at our organization in professional life, people are most greatest assets. So there is no way that we cannot invest in the talent. And in doing that, we actually need to identify those that are rising stars, those that are on the top quartile, and see how we can mentor them. And you know, David, you asked us to reflect on the questions that we said on you know, top talent, how to keep them. There are a few things that we do in our organization, especially around engagement. The important thing for me on engagement is that as a leader, being myself, I need to actually go lower, be approachable, let my team see me as Moses, not as the CEO. And there are various ways that I've been doing that in my organization. The top talents, I engage them, have lunch with them every second month, just us, 20, sometimes 25 of them. We engaged, and you know, we also take them through our strategy so that actually they participate as the people who goes and drive that strategy and bring them to life. One of them referred to the problem of delegating management to lower level. That's a problem. In the big organization, we do that, but I think as leaders, CEOs, we need to become servant leaders, as my brother Leslie said. And servant leaders, for me, is exactly the principles that you know, Robert Greene talks about, those 10 principles. Yes, there are many, but if you are a servant leader, you actually put the needs of your team, of people you lead, above yours, and therefore they can connect with you. So that's the belief that I hold.
Yes, David, I'm always amazed about how any organization, you'll find it in one of their values or strategy that people are their most prized asset. It's incredible. I think everybody in this room, their organization says that. But at the same time, it is so incredible how much deep service there is, which it doesn't make sense because organizations are driven by people. So as a CEO, if you do not live according to that cliche, but really live up to it, I don't understand how you expect the business to be successful. It's just a logic that always, it fascinates me. But for us, and I think different organizations obviously have got, the talent has got direct impact on the business success. Like in service industries, as most of you who are in service industry knows that we don't sell a product, you sell IP. So actually, more than any other ways, that those people that you are employed, they are your business. So if you do not make sure that you've got programs that make sure that you firstly can identify the top talent and you can retain them, you will be out of business. I'm in advertising, and talent is scarce and is quite a dog-eat-dog industry. And you are forced, and talent, because it's so scarce, it's always been traded and people hop all over the place. So talent retention is quite important. What we did as an organization, and to be honest, I think it might have been some element of luck. I appointed the financial director as the talent director. Now, if you think about it, I actually joke with him, and he's a rising star. He's in the room. I always joke with him to say, you know, you've got the most powerful position because you run people and the budget. I mean, that's quite a powerful portfolio. And I say it might have been luck because I don't think I would have done it if I not have met him, that though he is an amazing financial director, but naturally he's a people, talent person. So I don't want to take credit for it, to say I was quite strategic to see it. I think it was done by seeing him. But if you can imagine that, and we do, I mean, we have quite tight conversations about things because he himself has got to balance the two. But here's somebody who can absolutely, because the whole thing about this conversation is how do the individual and the business objective get meshed up. So here's a person who's on the board. He's also on the executive team. So it starts from the top. Talent cannot just be talked out by HR, and we all know about HR. It's the softer side of the business. it has to be in the boardroom. That's how important it is. So having this kind of person who is a board member and on ExCo, and it starts from the top. So it makes sure that whatever he's talking about, because it's part of his KPIs. I mean, his KPIs are not just on the financial achievement on the business. It's also in terms of talent attraction, talent retention. So unless it is absolutely owned at the board level, it becomes lip service. The last thing is servitude leadership, which Leslie and Moses talked about. That's the only kind of leadership. I know different books will tell you about different types of leadership, but true leadership is servitude leadership. But then here's the challenge with servitude leadership. You must be able to master those and run it through.
Thanks, David. Well, I guess you guys spoke a lot about leadership, so I'd rather come from where you guys are sitting. I was the youngest executive at SAB ever at 25 years old. But I didn't end up staying there, so they got it wrong. And I was on a high potential program. So this is what I know. First of all, the high potentials, golden children, whatever you want to call them, are a fickle bunch. You guys are smart, you're brilliant, you can go anywhere, you can do anything. Now somehow we have to take that and fit it into the real world, which is we've got to make profit, pay bills, deal with the shareholders, and you're not the only people who are climbing the ladder. So us guys here have to juggle all these balls and hopefully get it right for a period of time. I see the nods, okay. So here's a pragmatic piece of advice that I think I try and give those who are where I was when I was 25. You may think you can rule the world, but there are only a few roads to get there. And if you can have a discussion with your CEO about what road you want to be on, you're closer to going where you want to go than being frustrated because you're going nowhere. The second thing that in most cases is missing in these conversations is time. How long will it take you to get there? You think you can do it in a day. We might think it might take 2 or 3 years. And actually, in my mind and my own personal experience, that was the piece that was missing. That we could not become aligned on what a reasonable time was for us both to achieve the agenda that we could agree on. And so in most cases, when I find the rising stars fall in the pothole, is that their expectation of time to get where they want to go and the organization's ability to let them get there in that time are not matched. And that's where experience and youthful enthusiasm need to be matched with a compromise probably on both sides. And if all that works, you need to measure your progress well and have regular feedbacks, either to board or to your mentors or particularly to the person who is actually guiding you through your organization. So that's how I do it now. As a CEO, I can only provide a certain number of roads, and if one of those roads doesn't suit you, then maybe we're not well matched enough and I'm going to let you go, or you're going to choose to go somewhere else. How long will it take? And that's normally a disappointment to those rising stars because they know they can do it faster. But we must make sure that the risk is mitigated, that in the speed there are not mistakes that happen. And then lastly, when are we going to check in to see if you're going along okay, and what other support can we get there? And so those are the guidelines I now employ because I hit the wall in a program that didn't give me some of those tools. So I guess from a CEO perspective, it's a match of ambition and aspiration versus reality and delivery. And if you're going to be successful at being the next group CEO of something or another, I think somehow you've got to match all that together. And that would be my advice or reflection on some of these things.
Great, thank you. Perhaps to the rising stars, you've heard the perspectives from the CEO panelists. Can you maybe give a response or reaction to that, or maybe a question to one or more of them?
Thank you for that advice. I think it's great. What I would like to know is how do you then succeed or create a culture that allows for the things that you're talking about to actually take place, for the rising star to have access to you as a CEO, to say these are my plans, this is my scope, and for you to say these are the organizational plan and this is our roadmap for both myself as an organization and you as a rising star, and fitting that in with the culture, not just the senior level culture, because you do have subcultures within organizations that can pose challenges for that to happen.
So it's a good question. First of all, as leadership, whether in the servant role or whether in the shareholder role, because we have to service both, to be honest. you must set the vision and purpose regularly. And the world out there changes, so that may change. And then actually, I personally have an open door policy because I'm not one for spoon feeding. I believe that if you've got what it takes and you have the ability to take what the opportunity is, then you have to contribute something. We're not in a spoon feeding culture here. So if I set the vision and purpose correctly, and I have an open door policy, and those individuals, and in fact I apply this to the entire company, I make it my business to be more involved with those who I believe are high potential. But in fact, some of the greatest innovations come from people who are what I call maintenance workers. They are merely there to carry out the role that they're there to carry out on a daily basis. So it's an open door policy, and if you've got something to share with me, come and tell me. I'll tell you what I hate. And this is what I am finding as I get older. I'm not that old yet, is that I hate the fact that the youth arrive with the expectation of what I'm going to do for them. And the difference between being at school and being in business is that when you're in business, we now have a transactional relationship. I will definitely be doing things to make you successful. But I'd like to know what you're going to do to make us, the corporation, institution, or whatever it might be, successful. Now we've got to do it. But if you pitch up at my door all the time and say, I want, you're not my greatest star, because you're not going to be confident in committing to the broader organizational requirements when times get tough. So the one thing I do disagree with is the thing here that rising stars shouldn't take pain when everybody else is. If the company's making a loss and we've got to turn it around, protecting an individual is completely the wrong way to go, because when they get to the top, that's what they're going to expect, and that's not how the world works. Have I answered your question?
You have actually.
Can I answer that? To start off with, we have to have a talent strategy and execute it. You see, hope is not a strategy. With the best intentions, I might want to have an open door policy, love people, want them to be coming into my office. In fact, it is not practical. I've got a job to do. If you do not have formal structures for them to have it, you see, unfortunately, it sounds like, because we are also emotional and spiritual, sometimes we think that comes at an expense of being pragmatic and having structures. You can't run a business based on how people feel or based on personalities. We have a talent strategy. First, strategy is the best thing, is executing it, which means you even have platforms to make sure that people have an opportunity to talk to you. It is in a diary, it is a platform. It is not based on how Ivan wakes up and feels like it, or who he likes or not. That's the first thing. The second thing that I found absolutely amazing as well is the dirty word called performance management system. For goodness sake, if we want a situation where I can engage with you, and if you've got a performance management system, but in that you cannot have conversations about what are your aspirations, what are you good at, what are you better at, what is the performance management system all about? It is not for there to check in and to find out where this white people wants to go. The problem with it, again, is when HR is outside the leadership. Then it becomes a nightmare. Yes, we are going through performance reviews, we're going to see and talk about development, and then it gets filed into a document. And there has to be, so processes, and I know it sounds weird coming from an advertising agency, and we are all creative. I know it sounds strange for me to be talking about processes and formal structures, but that makes sure that things are not dependent on personalities or moods. Are they happy?
I think one of the greater challenges, by the way, it's very hot in here. I've just had to ask a white person because you know. It's the lighting, okay. I think one of the challenges with upcoming talent is that people get offended easily. When you're young, you're 23 or 25, you think the world goes your favor and you can live on your own time. Unfortunately, life doesn't work that way. Sometimes you need to understand that you need to earn your stripes. And you must be willing to walk the path. This maturity rise to the top. We soon find out that you don't have matric and you're right there. You see, so like, instant gratification. We tend to also want to translate it into our careers. Let me get spiritual on you, what God loves behind. Just because you are viewed as not being utilized in your organization doesn't mean that your turn will not come. When the time eventually comes, someone said no army can stand in the way of an idea whose time has come. So I just think it's a question of you need to learn to be patient. Because a lot of us, we rush to the top. And then when you get there, you realize, hey, geez, go with the winds. It's turbulent. But because the grounding was not solid, that's why a lot of people collapsed. And so I just wanted my little contribution is that don't be offended easily as a rising star. Be patient. Your turn.
Can I start? It's this point about the mulligan, the second chance, and I think for me an important thing is that stars want to try things out and they want an ability to fail. So I guess my question to the CEOs is, how do you manage that risk? How do you give enough space for people to, if stars to feel fulfilled, while at the same time not putting your business at risk? I'm in the professional services, in the audit services. How do you deal with that dynamic, I think?
My friend Leslie wants you to check that since you come from the professional. Look, from my point of view, and you're right, in our profession, failure can be drastic. Just imagine if I've allowed an audit opinion that is wrong to go out in the public domain. The shareholders will have lost money, everybody will be angry, and I don't even have enough PI cover to do for that. So the point that I'm getting at is that we need to balance a failure with support. And from my point of view in our organization is that we need to give rising stars, and in fact all our employees, the right tools continuously to guide them as to how they go about doing their roles. There must be an element of failure, but also, and I want to get back, in our organization we say, if you fly alone, you die alone. So failure, we combine it with consultation. So you have leaders above you that you need to consult. So the risk of failure has got enough mitigation around it. But it might be different in other organizations. But in our professional organization, that's how we do it. Failure means you can continuously consult your leaders so that you don't fly alone and die alone. You have other people who can guide you in the profession.
Is bigger with lower chance of damage if you fail. And I always say, don't come and ask me for the next chance if you can't tell me what you learned from the first one. Because I want to see the feedback loop. That's where the value lies. So it must be a contained risk in a scalable process, and it's unlikely you're going to go from 0 to hero in the first outing. You've got to get those stripes over time with scale in a way that the organization can absorb if it goes wrong. And if you win, wonderful.
I just want to add something. We spoke about the word alignment, and I think that's a very important word. There's a thing called a plumb line. To most black people, it's called waterpas. A plumb line is really there to make sure that you maintain balance. Most of you, if you drive a car, go and look at your tires. If the edges of your tires are finished, chief, then it means your car is not properly aligned. And a lack of alignment and misalignment leads to chaos in an organization. So I think as part of managing this process and mitigation and so on and so forth, those fancy English words, what we need is really to create, performance management system that my learned friend spoke about here should not be used as punishment tools. You wait for that time of the year and then you say, I'm going to get this bastard now. And then you start pointing out all the horrible, the word bastard exists in the Bible, the King James Version. You don't say, now I've got you. And then you start going through all the proper performance management is actually a daily exercise. And so when you get to that meeting, it's exactly what the CEO here said. It's about what have we learned and how do we then chart the way forward. Because I think most of the time, we even overlook the fact that failure is part of life. It needs to be, and this is part of the problem I struggle with South African corporate culture, is that there's this zero tolerance toward failure. And yet if you ask the CEO to look at his own life, he's failed one way or the other. And it is failure, but most importantly, I mean, John Maxwell talks about failing forward. And you fail forward when you say, these are the lessons that I've learned. So that next time you express an audit opinion, or somebody asks you to give advice over the phone, you just know that someone can end up wearing an orange overall. And I didn't say, sorry guys, I didn't say anything about dolus eventualis. All I'm saying is that you need to understand that we have to mitigate and we need to manage this expectation. And a performance management tool is one of the ways in which we can manage and balance out each other's expectations.
Yes, thank you, Liz.
My name is Jackie. I'm from the SABC, and yes, I have qualifications. My question to the CEOs is that oftentimes when you look at organizations, the problem that we encounter is that HR is not made a business partner, as mentioned, and you find that when selecting new people, there's a lack of job design and job analysis, and the mistake that's made is that monetary incentive and high salaries will then push high performers, and oftentimes that's not the case. And how can organizations put a strong force on getting HR as a business partner? And in that way, there'll be more training and development, there'll be more mentorship, and there'll be more output from employees. Thank you.
Anyone like to field that question? Moses? Please stay seated, it's fine.
Yeah, look, I think HR is an important part of business executive. In our organization, the HR leader sits in the boardroom in an executive room with us, because maybe it's easy for us because, as we said, people is the most important part of our asset. You need to have that in the boardroom so that you'll be able to deal with those various issues that you talk about, so that there are no gaps. But having said that, the responsibility of talent management, the other line managers cannot actually wash their hands and just said it's delegated to HR. Every partner in my organization, I call him an HR partner. Every leader is an HR partner. And the HR comes with the technical function, the soft issues that all of us need to bear in doing our business.
Can I add something to that? So I want to be critical of your question, because it strikes me that if you take yourself back to school, if there was a bully or a teacher was thinking one thing or whatever the story, you can't put up your hands and go to your mom or your dad and say, please solve my problem for me, right? You've got to figure it out for yourself. And likewise in an organization, HR can only do so much no matter how empowered they are. At the end of the day, you've got to go and get the job description and learn it for yourself. And then you've got to make an assessment. How many of these do I meet and how many do I not? Then go to your line manager and ask them, do you support me going for this or not going for this? And you have to make your own way. I can guarantee you that the rising stars in this room who've made it to the top did not sit back and wait for HR to solve their lives for them. But they took the initiative, they took the opportunities, they acquired the skills, and they made it happen. And I'm very critical of our corporate economy right now, because I think we have a number of people who are expecting HR to lift them up. And HR just can't do it. And if that's one thing I can set you free with this afternoon, is you are your own best advocate. Make your plan and go after it. And if you have no plan, then what happens? It's not going to go anywhere. And that's the best I can tell you. And I hope that that's a more generic answer for anyone in any organization. If you're lucky enough to be in KPMG, then obviously you've got a more supportive and competent system to support you, but many of us are not in that kind of environment.
Can I just, yeah, if I may, I think vision is quite important, and you need to have your own personal vision. And if you really want to understand the full measure and impact of vision, just close your eyes in traffic and try and drive about that.
You're sure about that?
Well, I'm not giving you that advice. Sorry. I'm just saying that, you know, if you don't have a personal vision for your own goal, you have a challenge, you have huge challenges.
Thank you very much. Any advice off the stage comes with a disclaimer. There's another question from the same student.
Hi, it's Teko Mukoti again from South African Gymnastics Federation. Well, my question is really a provocative one. I don't mean to insult the process, Rising Star. Please forgive me, that's not my intention. But the question is, how do you deal with Rising Stars in your organization? Do you tell them they're Rising Stars? Do you deal with it subtly? And how do you manage the process if somebody's talented and you want to have them to contribute to your organization? I know this process, we're dealing with Rising Stars and we give them that title. But I'm just worried that sometimes it gives you a big head and you might feel like you're entitled to everything. And that is also a request to Rising Stars. Please don't feel that way. Don't go that route. It's my request is, don't make problems for your organization. But I want to know from the CEOs, how do you deal with this issue?
Okay, so I often, part of my business is consulting to organizations who have this question. And I tell them there are two models. There's the overt model, where you have an assessment and everybody gets to go on it, often when they're graduate recruits, and you understand where they fall, and people know that they're in that select group. And then you have the covert way, which may be done differently at a board or at a nominations committee, where they identify their talent pipelines, and those individuals may or may not know that they are on that path. Both come with their challenges and benefits. So one is the context of the organization and what type of business or what sector you're in. The other, which the Rising Stars can comment on, is not only do you know that you're one of the selected few, but that comes with its own pressures. And a lot depends on the culture of the organization and the method that they're going to grow them. What I can tell you is the following, having been on these programs, is if you've got two brain cells, you will know whether you're getting slightly different opportunities or whether you're feeling fighting the rising tide. So whether it's overt or covert, to be honest, if you're in the program, you should have enough insight to understand whether you're getting some of that support or not. So I say that to chief executives, other ones, my peers, and they say, well, now that you've said it like that, in fact, is there any reason to hide it?
And maybe that's where I can come in. In our organization, as I said, we're a training ground. We attract 400 to 500 talent every year. We don't hide it. But what we do upfront, there's clarity as to how do you become one. Everybody starts from the, from the starting line with equal opportunities. And there's clarity to everybody, what do you need to be ahead of the pack. And once you are, I'll communicate with you, I'll give you an invitation to do other things that will keep you. So I make it public so that everybody wants to become one. Everybody aspires to be one. And if you're not one, you say, how can I get a second chance to be there? That's how I do it in my organization. And it gives me a better feel to engage them so that everybody can look at those to aspire to become one of them. So yeah, it comes with its own challenges, but my philosophy is you all start equal, but we know that you're not all equal. Some will be faster than the other and aspire to be faster.
Well, so, Rising Star.
I was just going to make one or two comments. The first one is you said, how do you make sure that your rising stars don't get a big head? Well, most rising stars do have big heads anyway, because high impact individuals do generally have a high level of self-esteem, they have self-confidence, they make it their business to know what's going on in their organization, they network, or other people have another word but that's who they are by nature. So 9 times out of 10, they're going to stand out somewhere along the line. That was just one thing I wanted to say. And I don't think that any business would want to create a culture of fostering the bottom feeders. It's that simple. And secondly, I also wanted to say, is to touch on the point that you made, that it comes with a lot of pressure. And there's a lot of expectation when you put on these programs. The company's investing in you. They're sending you off to go study somewhere. The expectation is that you do additional education, whether it be online or that you read up a lot on things. That for myself, I have to run a mentorship program, and I do all of this in my own time. So there's been times when the expectation is that I get on a plane and go somewhere to do a talk because I'm part of the program, and it means that I miss my daughter's ballet concert. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of pressure. It puts pressure on you from a time perspective, it puts pressure on you personally, and at the same time you're still expected to perform higher than the average person in the organisation. So you're probably operating at 2 times the rates that normal other people are. So it's not all mother with an apple pie. That's all the point I wanted to make.
I think slightly different perspective. I think the challenge, which is as important as how you deal with your stars, is how you deal with people who are struggling. And I think you're looking for an organisation that applies the same set of values to both sets of people. So, nurturing stars as well as nurturing people who are struggling. I think that's really key as well. So there's a new concept, or not new, but I mean it's been more formulated now lately that I've been reading about globally, where it's not all about the high potentials. The high potentials will only be somewhere between 9 and 13% of the general population. The question is, what about everybody else? And it doesn't necessarily mean they're strugglers, by the way. The concept says as much as the high potentials can go all the way to be group CEO, so everybody else has the ability to become what's called now a high professional. So it doesn't mean because you're not group CEO, you're nothing. It means you have an ability to be an expert lawyer, or an expert tax specialist, or an expert executor, or an expert project manager. And in fact, good organizations have an ability to see both paths for growth. And the key then is, based on that personal vision you were talking about and the self-empowerment I was telling you about, is to try and get an understanding of which road you're traveling down, and then to be driving your agenda down that road. And in fact, if that happens and the organisation services all its employees with equal opportunity from the line, everybody wins, and so does the enterprise. And that is a win-win-win model that everybody needs to be part of.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, well, first of all, I don't think there's a silver bullet to your question. I think it's a very multifaceted question. John Maxwell wrote a book entitled Talent is Not Enough. It doesn't matter how talented you are. If your talent does not align with the organizational strategy and where the organization is going, I think there's bound to be conflict. But the point that I really want to make, and this is my parting shot, is that I think as an individual you need to run your own race. And for you to be able to run your own race, you need to understand your shape. And by shape, I mean, I use it as an acronym. S is about spirituality. H is about your heart. A is about your ability. Know and understand your ability. Because oftentimes in organization, and generally in life, we tend to focus more on our weaknesses rather than our strengths. It doesn't matter how sometimes when we talk to ourselves, we become our worst critics. And we talk very harshly to ourselves. If you really harness the talent that you have and you know your ability, P is about personality. E is about your experiences in life. Nobody knows you better than you. And if you really want to grow, know your shape.
Thank you. Can we take maybe 1 or 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up? There's a hand waving down there as well. Maybe we'll make that the last question. So we've got someone standing up already. You slow off the start line.
My first.
Please go.
My name is Barbara Koba. I'm from ArcelorMittal. The point I would like to make a comment actually. I'm a firm believer in Ubuntu and humility. And we all sit in there as CEOs, and one comment that I heard was that there's ego and humility is not necessarily what would help being at the CEO level. Sorry, I'm misquoting, but I just got a sense that humility is not one of the values that one of the CEOs necessarily, promotes. But I just want to say that we all say that people are our greatest assets, right? And what people appreciate is being acknowledged and recognized. And as a CEO, I believe that that is one person that has the biggest responsibility in terms of making people feel at home, making people have a sense of belonging, and therefore making the time and having the ability to make those people drive and deliver the business agenda and wholeheartedly and with a passion. So if you're not going to go down to the level of the people and engage with them, I think you're missing an opportunity of embracing the people and also getting the people's buy-in and commitment to the organization. And we always talk about Ubuntu as South Africans. It is something that is embedded in how we interact and how we relate. And it doesn't make you a lesser person. Being humble. And Mandela was. And we always refer to him as our hero. So let's live it.
I think just reflecting on the discussion of the panel, I mean, I had a lot of discussion, servant leadership, humility. So I certainly experienced that coming out from the panel and connecting with staff at whatever level. And I think from the CEO platform, driving that culture through the different tiers of the organization as well. John Peters has a saying, if you bring people in as your so-called assets and you don't treat them as such, they will move from assets to depreciating assets, and ultimately they will become liabilities to your organization. So if you have that mindset around your talent, people may come in with huge aspirations, you may see that potential, you may nurture it, but if you neglect it, very slowly they will move into that limited space. We have one hand up.
Hello? Sorry. My name is Exai Cornelius Robo, author of The Mathematical Genius. It's going for 100 rand, so please, before you go out to the coming line,
That's our commercial break for the afternoon's
So, just as someone who is in the education space, I think many of us here have had those teachers that have told you you're not good enough. And there's been streamlining where the good kids are put on their own and the bad kids are put on their own. So from what I'm hearing, I stand to be corrected. Are we segregating? Right? Obviously we are performance oriented, yes, definitely. But is there segregation that is perpetuating the battered education system that we're trying to mend? So we're just taking that framework and putting it in the workplace. Because what I'm saying here is that I was saying the rising stars are the masses of the team, and then those who have been branded as rising stars are your defenders and all those other supporting players that do not necessarily get the chance to score the winning goal. So do all players in the company or the institution have an equal probability? I'm now going on statistics on you. Do they have an equal probability of rising, starting from the tea lady to the highest office? Do they have the same framework that accounts for performance, or it's the messages that are always going to be celebrated?
Can I ask the CEOs to make a comment on that? I don't know the views, but I would prefer to do. Yeah, please go ahead.
I think when any person walks into an organization for the very first time, you're walking equally. What gets you recognized is your ability to deliver and your ability to connect to others. And I think what organizations try and do through the talent process is they look for those individuals that are A, delivering, and B, connecting. And I think importantly also, once you've been identified to include and take other people with. And most probably the most important lesson I learned as I kind of came up my ranks and paid my dues was you start out thinking it's all about me, and it's all about the project I'm on and what I'm doing. And somehow through that mentorship and talent program, I learned what it means to be a servant leader. I learned what it means to include others and take others with me on this journey. And most importantly, I learned I'm never going to step into those senior positions unless I can take others with me. And that's others of all levels. It's taking the stars with me, it's taking people back in with me, and it's taking the people that actually do the day-to-day graft that carry our business through. So I don't think the process is about segregating. I think it's about people who put their hand up and say, notice me, I can do more. And then giving them their opportunity to do that.
It's a wonderful answer, well said. But I want to answer you more clearly.
But just to add on to that, I think rising stars, we just don't end up as a rising star. We start somewhere. And as you go through that journey, you also become, I think we call them professionals. You're also a professional, but then you also aspire when you see other rising stars. And once you aspire to become a rising star, you will act and lead in a way that makes other professionals want to become a rising star. So I don't think it's segregating, but I think it's identifying people that will take the organization forward, but then they will take people with them. And I think most of us here, we are leading people and we lead, like she indicated, professionals, we lead other rising stars. So I honestly don't think it's segregating.
So I disagree a little bit, and I'll tell you why. Managing your career through whatever corporate you happen to be in is a little bit like being on the snakes and ladder board, okay? And we all start at the line equal to begin with, but I might throw 6 and you might throw 1. And that means I might have a CA degree from Harvard and you might be unqualified. So I'm ahead, I am segregated, but here's the good part. You know, I might be running a division and make a couple of bad mistakes, and I land up on the snake, and I'm gone. Likewise, I might be going slower, just at my own pace, driving my own professional ability, and if I'm managing my self-determination, like I mentioned to the lady over there, I may stumble across the bottom of a ladder and manage to shoot up higher than where I may have landed up at any one time. And so I always say to executives and people working in organizations, it's about how awake you are. Be self-aware, understand the snakes and ladders around you, and learn to activate what you can to the best of your ability. So yes, you are segregated at times if everything was equal. But life in the corporate world and the political world and wherever you happen to be is not equal all the time. The snake might get you, or you may stumble across the ladder, and it's up to you to manage that as best you can.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to end it there if you don't mind. If you do have any questions for the panelists, those who ask them around afterwards, if you could approach them and raise those outside of the session. So just on my behalf, thanks to all the stars and thanks to the remaining CEOs. We had a bit of a retention problem there. But thank you very much for your participation.